As you can see, this looks very similar to the last video. I've gone ahead and left the front axles on here just to demonstrate where this would go in the car. Now, this axle up here is the front, and this is the second axle, and this would go right in the middle of the two. Now, this thing uses these two linkages that are turned by gears of two different sizes. So this second axle actually always turns a tiny bit less than the front, so that you can actually turn properly. Because if these turn the same amount as the front, it would steer pretty weirdly. As you can see, this is a very simple setup that I've got going on here. I've just got a cheap RC servo going through a very, very long linkage in there, going to a gear in between these two gears right here, and then driving these gears, and then driving these linkages. And if you make these gears just right, which you're gonna have to remake them a bunch of times, first of all, I recommend ABS instead of PLA, because you want them to be a tiny bit flexible. Now, if you get all the slop out of there, and it's going to be really tight, you should have trouble putting in the middle gear, because it should be so tight. You will never get these to skip a gear or skip a tooth. Now, I haven't done that perfectly. It has skipped a tooth at some point. That's not too big of a deal for me. I can live with that. But the thing about this is that over time you're going to get slop in this, which is what I talked about in the previous video, and you're just going to have to deal with that until someone designs a new steering setup. Now, this steering thing just pops on the main chassis rails right here in between these two, and that's basically it. Then these attach over to here, to these ball joints, and that's all that you need to do to attach this to the frame and to attach these to this. So now I'm going to go a bit more into detail about the gears. So first of all, by now you should already know that the F3D file for all of these, for especially all the gears, have parameters to change their size, and these ones are pretty important. You gotta get them just right. So you're gonna be printing maybe 10 of the 10 test sets. I would only recommend you print a few of these bigger gears and then print a bunch of different smaller gears. You might be able to see, no you can't. The smaller gears right just in there. You could really use any servo for this. I've just used the cheapest metal gear servo that I could find, and for me that is just fine. I don't need to have that much steering torque, but if you want more steering torque, definitely get a better steering servo. This thing actually uses quite a few bearings. You've got one up there, one there, one there. So you've got 3 per one of these long axles, in addition to this one if you decide to use the things that mount on the round stock that goes in between the axles. So you'll be using a total of 6 or 8 bearings depending on what you do. Now these ball joints are just the default OpenRC choice ball joint. They're cheap on eBay. They'll be linked in the sourced files spreadsheet. You can find them there. Other than that, the steering is pretty simple. Usually what you would have is you would have the servo directly on one of these, and then that would turn the other sets of these. But I've decided to go against that here because I decided to 3D print the linkages that go from here to the axles. And if I wanted to use these ball joints and 3D printed parts, there would be way too much slop in there, and that would just be a really, really sloppy steering at the wheels. So I didn't want that. This is the best thing that I could come up with in reasonable time. I tried a few different things. This one worked out the best. As you can see, it has this hole right here. That's actually for the drive shaft to go through. The gearbox is way over here, and it actually has to go through right here to the transfer case, which is way down there. So now, with the steering out of the way, we can move on to the gearbox.